First off, I'd like to start this video by saying I've got an AC unit now, so any background noise you hear is from this, and I'm sorry. Today's video is yet again about what scene is and scenecore and the sort, because I've been seeing more people running around saying this, that, about this or that. So it's occurring to me that, first of all, I should turn the speed down on this so that it's less of an annoying background noise. That's better. It's occurring to me that people argue a lot over what scene is alone, and I know the answer, that's what I'll tell you. Scene is abbreviated from hardcore scene. It came about in the very start of the 2000s, when people started to dress to imitate other subcultures such as emo and punk, and scene was a derogatory term used because the subculture of scene was predominantly women, and terms like scene queen were derogatory terms used by emo and punk and other subcultures, men in those subcultures, used to antagonise scene girls. And then scene queen sort of became its own term, and we use that now as a positive thing in scene. Now, this starts this whole scene is opposed to subculture thing, right? And there's 2 points to make about that. First of all, the statement of scene being opposed to subculture, that stems from said men in other subcultures trying to antagonise scene because it was mostly female dominated, by calling them posers for being interested in such a thing. So it's misogynistic in root. The roots of it are misogynistic. And second of all, every subculture, par punk, is opposed to subculture. Goth came from punk, emo came from punk, scene came from emo, grunge came from punk, and so on and so on. The only one that doesn't fit into this is metalheads, but metalheads is its own culture entirely. Second misconception that people like to bring up when arguing about what's what is things like autism in the scene and not being able to wear tight clothes. Everyone's different. I'm autistic too. I wear tight clothes, as you can see there. Right? I get it, right? People don't like the sensory in some things, but the thing is, sometimes it's a harsh reality, but it's something that's got to be said. Sometimes a subculture just isn't for somebody, right? There's a lot of subcultures in this world, and sometimes if you have like hard time dressing the part, or you don't necessarily enjoy the music or anything, sometimes the subculture is just not for you, and that's okay as well, yeah, because I guarantee you there's other subculture which you do enjoy the music and you do enjoy the dress style or whatever. It doesn't set off any issues. Even though you might still admire people from this culture, you can still join the alternative community through other subcultures, right? It doesn't. You don't have to overly adapt to a subculture if it makes you uncomfortable, and likewise, you shouldn't try to overly adapt a subculture because that'll make actual members of the culture uncomfortable. Case in point number 3, which I'd like to make, is it's okay to be obviously colour puke, as we're calling it now. That's what would formerly be known as scenecore. Colour puke is a derivative of glitchcore, which was a 2020 subculture, which stemmed from scene and expanded on like solitary activities because it came from the solitude of the COVID-19 lockdowns. It focused on solitary activity, things like DIY, creativity, the concept of like invention and creativity in making things like making rifles out of Monster Energy cans and the sort. And the music reflects this, hyperpop music. The reason hyperpop isn't seen is because hyperpop is not a hardcore genre, and also likewise hyperpop wasn't largely around during the development of the subculture. Hyperpop stems from a lot of things, and while things like hardcore punk and emo are some of the stems, it also stems from things like bubblegum pop and radio rock, which are not hardcore. So hyperpop overall isn't regarded as a hardcore genre because of that. Obviously, scene is separate to this, having been a movement for the hardcore scene. The music, either the split of the music is hardcore music, things like mathcore, post-hardcore, dubstep. I'm trying to think of the genre name, I don't remember. Happy hardcore, happy hardcore techno, you know, so that sort of thing. And yeah, the no and that sort. That's one side of it, and the other side was scene was mostly teen. Scene teen, it's a term in the subculture. So things like bedroom pop, like early Owl City, Jordan Sweeto, and the sort. Early bedroom pop, and synth pop as well to an extent. Now onto the actual sort of bulk of the video. What is the scene? Now, everyone sort of argues about what the scene is, but the scene obviously is hardcore scene, hardcore music. That's the scene. People who go to concerts, engage in activity, engage in a local hardcore scene. That's what the scene is, right? And the scene subculture is derivative from that, the hardcore scene, which has a focus on. It's got a focus on like staying with what you want to do alongside sort of fitting in, if that makes sense. It's a split between the middle, doing what you want but also being able to fit in. The song, although people argue a lot about what the like definitive scene song is, I would always say Things That Rhyme With Orange by I Set My Friends On Fire. A lyric from that, which I think applies in the situation, is it's a marker, it's a sign, it's a marker, it's a sign, it's something we define, it already exists, but you helped redefine an emblem for all your aesthetic kin to recognise you by. And I was talking to a friend a while ago, and I said to them, scene is subculture, which focuses on, while doing what you want, being true to yourself, also creates a community that you can fit in with doing such things. So things like scene hair, you know, bracelets, all of that. It's basically a sign saying, hey, I'm with you, I agree with you. Come here, we can talk, we can be friends and all that. That's what scene is, effectively. Of course, I am aware that contradicts some things I said earlier about being true to yourself and that. But as subcultures develop, which they do, it's undeniable. People try to argue they don't, most notably in the emo community, talk about Rites of Spring and things. People like to argue they don't, but they do, and because the subculture has developed, there are certain markers which people look for in the subculture, so that they know that they are one and the same. Now, on to the next point about the development of the scene. Scene kids often engage in terms of controversy and things which would be considered immoral by a lot of people's standards. Most notably, things like fashion, and a lot of former scene stars have been convicted of heinous crimes now. Now, in the modern day, we're trying to rule a lot of that out, yeah? Things like, notably, Blood on the Dance Floor, Darby Vanesson's band. We don't like that here. Yeah, we're not endorsing anything he's doing or anything. Whereas back then, probably would have. Unfortunately, it was the 2000s were not a big paradise like people make out to be. Even though certain people's circumstances, like mine, probably would have been better off then. Because I stray away from most things regarding politics, celebrity crime, etc. The general public was not. It wasn't a great place to be, and that's the truth of it, unfortunately. But in the modern day, we are trying to rule that out. But that, of course, jumps onto the term, or not term, but it jumps onto the topic of people getting on each other's cases for ordering from places like Shein, notably. Now, Shein and Temu are fast fashion distributors which utilise the work of sweatshops in countries like China. And in the morality and the worst of sweatshops, we consider them immoral, bad, yeah? Because they use things like child labour, which, as we know, is bad. Following on from that though, just because something is a fast distributor doesn't necessarily make it completely negative. Like back in the day, scenesters used to shop at places like Hot Topic and Spencer's in America, and places like HMV in the UK, HMV, Forbidden Planet, and the sort. Now, although the sort of how they got their produce, how they got their stock, all of that is a bit of a toss-up. They're not necessarily 100% negative to buy from, yeah? Like, you'll still go down to the HMV or the Hot Topic or whatever to look for CDs. Maybe not Hot Topic nowadays, or like the new HMVs, but you definitely would have maybe 5 years ago. And I say 5 years ago, not 20 years ago, because new HMVs were only being rolled out 2023, 2022. So it is a fairly recent development on that. But this carries over to certain websites as well. An example of this, AliExpress is essentially the Eastern world's eBay, right? It's lots of small distributors selling their stuff on there. A lot of them are rip-offs, admittedly. A lot of them are ripped-off products of other things. But, you know, you could argue that, like, these bracelets here, this one says Pikaga. I'm not Searle. I didn't make that. Well, I made this, but I'm not Searle. So you could argue that's a rip-off. You could argue this shirt I'm wearing is a rip-off because I have to make my own custom-sized shirts because nothing fits me. Yeah, like, the morality of fast fashion is very 50-50 in truth. It's very 50-50. If you're thinking about ordering something from a website, you should always look into the website's history first to know if you are funding things like child labour. The last point I would like to make, I mentioned it earlier with I Set My Friends on Fire. The song Things That Rhyme with Orange does actually greatly outline the scene in and what it stands for. Lyrics like, I'll participate in what you believe if you give me the attention, is a display of how scenesters used to participate with each other, and that's how the terms like it's not a phase came to be, because some people would just have the phase where they dressed as such because other people were doing it or their friends were doing it. They would get into it so that they merged with them. So more lyrics like, it has to be a unanimous determination because one opinion would be a pointless appreciation. Shows that while scene was also about fitting in as a community, it was also about staying true to yourself to some degree. It has to be unanimous determination. Everyone has to decide what the outlines are, because if you only have one opinion, if you only have one way of dressing, one subculture in the world, then everyone just agrees instantly and it becomes pointless. You can't have just one focus. You have to have a lot of them. And that carries over to the scene in the subculture itself, because people will, you know, scenes, it's a big subculture. There's lots of genres. There's post-hardcore, there's electropop, there's dubstep, there's hardcore techno, there's industrial rock, yeah? Some people may argue that post-hardcore is the best scene genre. Some people might argue electronica is the best scene genre. Some people might say the definitive scene icon is Invader Zim. Some people might say it's Pikachu, you know? And so on and so on. The scene in itself is a very big thing. And like I says, you have to unanimously determine how you're going to go about it, because if you only agreed on one thing, it would be pointless. And the rest of the lyrics in the song, like I said earlier, marker sign, something to define, emblem for your receptacle to recognise you by, all of that, it describes the scene incredibly well. So if you're trying to get into scene and you're willing to dress the part, you're willing to listen to the music for the part, I'd argue that's one of the first songs that you should listen to, because it does effectively give you a very good outline of the scene. If you go up, look up the meaning of the lyrics, it tells you all about it as well. And so on and so on. Like, especially the chorus. Blame it on the corporate skyscrapers in the clouds. They're the corporate skyscrapers and entities, big companies, are the people who started subcultures effectively as a side effect of capitalism. Punk is against capitalism, and like I said earlier, more or less every subculture comes from punk. So we blame them, but if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have all the multiple subcultures. And deciding which side you belong to is deciding what subculture merges best with your personal beliefs and which one you belong to. And that's what seen as a subculture is about, deciding where you belong and deciding where you can fit in to talk about things you like and be yourself, alongside having a sort of community and platform to talk about, to fit in with. Anyway, I think that's going to be it for this video. I wanted to outline that because there's more controversies popping up regarding subcultures. And like I said, it's okay if you're, you know, colour puke, glitchcore, or anything past scene. You just have to know what your subculture stands for, and that it's not to be merged in with other subcultures. You know, scene's not emo, emo's not punk, goth isn't punk, goth isn't emo, glitchcore isn't e-kids, e-kids not glitchcore, scene isn't glitchcore, you know, e-kids not scene, etc, etc, colour puke's not blah blah blah. I think it's just important to know that, because if you just merge them all together, it would be a pointless appreciation. Like Friends on Fire said, it would be pointless if you merged them all together, because we'd all agree on one thing. And we can't have that, because we need to have the differentiation so that you can appreciate the beauty and difference. Anyway, that's about it for this video. I'll leave this together and I'll post it up. See you guys.